Hello, folks. Yeah, I'll make this quick as, oh boy, is it cold up here. Right. Welcome to some Hobby Nightmares. We are into our new week here. If you like what I do, please like the video. It is amazing for me and the algorithm. It really does help me out. And before we do anything, I think it's time to do our second Hobby Nightmare with Mads to try and get through her cavalcade of Hobby Nightmares that she sent through the other day. So Mads says, this is Nightmare number 2, and she says, after almost a year after joining, my friendly local game store had to close down. Phil, our manager from our last Hobby Nightmare on Friday, was not doing the best of jobs managing it, admittedly, and after meeting the love of his life, decided to become a neighbourhood police officer and close down the shop. He had also stopped playing World of Warcraft, to my knowledge, just for her, and turned his life around for the better. A shame, as I have met some great friends there, to which I still talk to almost daily. But all the luck to him. Yeah, I mean, some guys just need... It's going to sound really bad, and I know a lot of guys are going to go, no! Some guys do need, shall we say, a woman to straighten them out a little bit. So, enter local game store 2. Further away, but bigger. Long tables for once. Fridges full of drinks, snacks and ice cream. And row upon row of display stations with boxes of miniatures on them. It had an active community, held regular events, and even had a back room with glass windows for people who wanted to store armies and play D&D. Some of my friends from local game store 1 had also moved there, and it was their suggestion that I come along and try it for myself. I met more friends there as well, and even Roy and Steve were there. If you don't know Roy and Steve from our last Hobby Nightmare, they were the little cretins who had a bit of a rant about last time, but there we are. Roy and Steve had apparently been regulars there for ages at this point, and got along really well with the local game store owner. So much so that they would regularly joke around together, and the local game store owner would even commission Roy and Steve to paint store armies for him, in exchange for store credit or containers of ice cream. The store itself was run by a very tall and rotund, bearded man. Always wearing a t-shirt, sweatpants and sandals without socks. Let's call him Harry. Harry was the type of local game store owner where you just didn't want to be around. Okay. As there was something clearly off about him. Harry would always do 2 things, and 2 things only. Paint miniatures, and be a general nuisance. Harry would always make it very clear to everybody that this was his store, and that he was in fact the law. Harry would always act like he knew everything about everything, and any dispute on that fact was not tolerated. Harry also bordered on the dangerously obese and would drag his feet every time he waddled around his store. You could even hear Harry approach, not just by the signature dragging of his sandals, but also the verbal abuse or crude comment he would make towards a group of people generally around his orbit. Harry would also sweat, a lot, have sweat stains on his clothing, and leave a waft of smell about him at all times. Ironically, he would tell other that guys to go wash up or wear deodorant before coming to his store. Funnily enough though, even if Harry wasn't around, you could always still smell his presence around the place. Harry's wife would try to alleviate this issue, however, by opening up doors and windows and scolding him and having to do the washing and get him to change clothing. A code word for her to use in public to tell him he had smelled bad and needed to change outfits. Dude. If you've ever wondered, how am I ever going to find a woman, just remember. There's a guy like this in the world, and even he's not single. Just saying. Just saying. Then again, we don't know what she's like, but anyway. Personally, I cannot think of a single fun moment I had with Harry, or a single moment where I would bond with the store owner. Like I would have with Phil. In fact, Harry was on the complete opposite side of Phil. Harry would aggressively push products on you, from Games Workshop models, new games, paints, and food and drink. Oh, what a lovely, charming little person we have on our hands here. And if you were to stay at the store for games, Harry would berate you for bringing your own snacks or drink, as he was banking on people buying those from the store, something I can't really hold against him, if not for the fact that he would sell these at significantly increased margin prices. In fact, Harry would only really be nice to you if you had money or had just bought something from him. I all too well remember times when he was being dismissive for people I all too well remember times where he was being dismissive of people for their age or sex and would act like a creep around any and all women. The only times he reined it in was when his wife was around, which luckily for us was half of the time. What perhaps would disturb me the most, being a young teen, was Harry making comments towards me which were extremely suggestive or hinting at the fact that I was in fact a young teen and was likely active with people of my own age in certain areas. Much to the delight of Roy and Steve, who at this point had made this local game store their near permanent stay, even after school, as well as on weekends. Yeah, that's because they're little idiots, that's why. That's why. You know, they were idiots in the last story, and they're idiots in this one as well. Okay? Again, garbage attracts garbage. Just does. Garbage attracts garbage. I'm telling you now. Steve, who at this point had made this... Okay. As this was a hit, Harry would use this as a running joke towards me, specifically for the coming years. Please note that I was between 13 and 15 years old at the time, and didn't really know how to deal with this other than laughing it off or ignoring it. Suffice to say, compared to Phil, Harry was a complete disaster. The only thing he would have in common with Phil is that he would eventually, years later, also have to close down his store due to complete mismanagement. Alrighty. Nightmare number 3. Oh, let's jump in. Harry was the owner of the local game store, and Roy and Steve were pretty much always there. But there was one person who was a mainstay at that place. Let's call him Bob. Where Harry was bordering on dangerously obese, Bob, in fact, was dangerously obese. Bob was also a postman, and had to walk many steps a day in order to deliver mail to people, which to us didn't make any sense as to why he also stayed very large. That sounds like an illness to me, like a thyroid problem or something. Like, how can you be that big and be, like, walking that far? It doesn't matter. Unless he's eating, like, 4,000 calories a day and doing nothing else when he gets home. Bob was always at the local game store, despite being married and having children. Oh, yeah, that's a... And when I say always, I mean always. He was always there. No matter when, from opening till closing, wearing his t-shirt, sweatpants, and also wearing sandals. Fused to his chair, every day, with his postman's satchel next to him. In fact, Bob was so often at the store that the actual owner was, as Harry often switched to In fact, Bob was often more at the store than the actual owner was, as Harry often switched supervision with his wife. And as such, Bob would often be asked to help keep an eye on things and would therefore enjoy certain special privileges, like being able to use the storage room in the back, the size of a small bedroom, which, I would find out months later, was filled with all of Bob's armies and models, his personal belongings, clothing, food, and other things that should be stored at home, not at your local game store. This guy's going to move in, isn't he? All of this was seemingly going on since the early days of that store as well, and because of this, Bob seemed to think and act as if he co-owned the store. Let's be very clear, Bob did not co-own the store, and was just a regular and well-paying customer. He just acted and carried himself as if he did. I'm going to say this, a lot of Games Workshop support staff do this too. They don't actually work for Games Workshop, but they will talk to fellow hobbyists like they do. It just always irked me. I was like, dude, you don't even... You work voluntarily for next to no money for a company that doesn't even like you enough to actually say you're employed by them. That's nothing to be proud of. Bob was usually painting, mumbling, and ranting to anybody who would listen, and, just like Harry, would act like he knew everything and throw verbal abuse at people if they did anything to annoy him, which in Bob's eyes was all the time for even the slightest of offences. Mads, why did you keep going to this store? A few of these would have been enough for me to go, okay, yeah, I know I've got nowhere else to go in the hobby. I would rather have nowhere else to go. I will go and enjoy my hobby on my own time. Thank you. Such as, and these were the offences that, Bob didn't like, such as misquoting Monty Python. Oh, okay. Rolling low on a dice roll, even if he was not in that game. Walking around him too much. Taking one of his chairs. They didn't belong to him, they were just stood around his usual table and weren't being used. Speaking too much, speaking too little, blocking his light, blocking his view of the store, and having an interest in the things that Bob didn't like, which was most things. Other than that, Bob was painting all the time. Also, just like Harry, he would struggle to walk, stand up, and was easily irritable, generally did not look after himself or his appearance, including a bad smell, long nails on his hands and feet, poorly shaven, etc., and got along relatively well with Roy and Steve. What a surprise! Roy and Steve get along with another miscreant. What a surprise. What a surprise. If you've not read about Roy and Steve or listened to a story about them, you go to the last Hobby Nightmare. You will. They're horrible. I'm going to say something now, then. It's going to be quite, how do I put it? Controversial? Harsh? I don't know. I would, if you came to my store, right, and you were unkempt, smelly, not a very nice person, right, within 30 seconds, I'm kicking you out. That sounds really harsh. Do you know what I mean? But, I did it at Games Workshop. More than once. I do it nicely. Say, listen, man, can I have a chat with you? There are certain standards in the store that I need to uphold. Okay, for my business and for the company. I don't know whether you've just been to the gym. That was always a good way to, diffuse them. You know what I mean? Like, oh, have you been working out? Sort of a thing. I don't know whether you've been to the gym, but the smell is not great. You need to go home, get a shower, get a change of clothes, and then you're more than welcome to come back. You know what I mean? But I can't have you walking around like that in the store, alright? And do you know what? I had several complaints. And they were complaints that head office didn't listen to. They were like, yeah, keep them out. Keep those people out. Don't let them in. And be nice to them. Let them know what the standards are and make them leave. Because we don't want them around. What we don't want is little Timmy coming in with his high-spending mother, only for her to look around and go, oh my god, this is what my son could become in 5 years. Right? We don't want that. So we generally back away and get rid of them. I don't know. I know I might get a lot of hatred for that in the comments, but just shut up, get a wash. Anyway. Bob since invited 14/15-year-old me, Roy and Steve, out for an evening of Warhammer Fantasy RPG at his home. Mads, why did you go to this? Why? Though I would later find out that we were asked specifically because Roy and Steve were the only people who showed any interest, and they needed a last player to play in his awesome, hardcore, mature roleplay session that would be totally cool and amazing. You would lose limbs, your money, and your sanity, and failure rate was 98%, etc. Yeah, the Dark Souls crowd. Yeah, what a fun bunch. When I got to his home, on time, which was about 8 PM, the other players were already there, and everybody was, all but Bob, our DM, himself. Okay? The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside Bob's home was the god-awful and pungent smell. Way worse than anything at the local game store, as if several dogs had been left to roam and urinate freely wherever they wanted, all without actually owning a pet. His children were watching the Holy Grail with Roy and Steve, and Bob's wife was folding laundry. I joined them and frequently lifted my clothing to cover my nose to filter out the smell. Dude, just leave. Something came up. Just leave. It took about another hour before Bob actually got home. He took a small break to eat something, watched Monty Python with us, had a drink, and then had us sit down around his table. It took Bob another 2 hours of waffling with Steve and Roy and trying to go over the rules with us before we even got hold of our character sheets. The characters were all pre-made, and we were supposed to choose one of the 3 he had made. His story made little sense to us, and at the time, it was already closing in on midnight. I myself was quickly close to passing out from both fatigue and boredom, though ironically, the only thing that kept me semi-awake was the rank and bitter smell around the house. As time went on, Bob got more and more agitated with us for being tired and ruining his game. He asked us why we even bothered showing up if we were just going to waste his evening, and so forth. Basically, kicking us out of his home. My mother had already phoned to come and pick me up before this, and I was glad to leave. Roy and Steve both had bikes, so they didn't really care either way. They were just disappointed at the lack of a good game and the wasted evening. Bob's only saving grace at this point was that he was not afraid of Harry, our manager from our previous nightmare. Bob was slightly older than Harry, and the only one taller and bigger than Harry as well. Where Harry looked like he had never been in a serious fight before, Bob at least looked like he could throw a punch, and it was actually doing some damage. He used this fact, and the fact that Harry needed him to regularly and openly speak out against Harry in a verbal tirade of back and forth abuse. Straight out of Grumpy Old Men. Or Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets, but as if they were 2 rivaling nations aggressively threatening each other with nuclear warfare from across the room without actually having anything to threaten each other with. Let me be clear, however. Bob's intentions were never to stick up for us when Harry got out of hand, but rather he saw this as an opportunity to lord his bulk over Harry in their internal struggle for store dominance and their position as being the main that guy of the store. Bob and Harry just had this deep urge to be better than the other, like 2 fat, overgrown children. This behaviour would go on for years after I had left the local game store. Bob would continue to bring more and more of his things into the local game store, however, to the point where a portion of the store would just be unusable, due to the sheer amount of crap that belonged to Bob, who would get exceedingly angry with anybody touching his things, which got harder and harder to do since they were just everywhere. How not to run a business 101, ladies and gentlemen. Bob and Harry would eventually have such a falling out over this that Bob actually packed up everything and left the store, which I imagine took several weeks, or hauling a small packages on foot, or instead a small van and a lot of packing boxes. Be ready for nightmare number 3 when we get into it next time. I think you mean nightmare number 4, but yes. Yes. How not to run a store. Literally how not to run a store. I beggars belief, man. It beggars belief. Dude, it's private property. Just get rid of him. Just get rid of him. And if you need somebody like this to prop up your store with their purchases, your store's terrible. Just close. Just close and do something else. Sell the store, do something else. My God. That was a frustrating read. Very frustrating. These people are in the hobby, though. And this is... What this is, folks, is a time vampire. Do you remember that phrase that I used to use? Time vampire? That is a customer who comes into your hobby store, asks loads of questions, takes up loads of time from your day when they're doing painting, gaming, or whatever, right? And never buys anything or does anything. Well, this is what this guy kind of is, even though he buys the odd thing, right? This is the time vampire taken to the absolute extreme. This is what happens when you don't come down on it like a ton of bricks. If someone's coming into your store and taking liberties, this is where it goes. This is where it ends up. Okay? I hold our hobby to certain standards, and I hold the people within it to certain standards. I will not have you coming into my store and reinforcing every negative stereotype that there are about wargamers. It ain't happening. Sorry. You know. Zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. Like, if I ever do have a store, it'll be a place of betterment. You know? You come in, and the 5 or 6 older dudes who are there, who are really good hobbyists, help you out. And if you're there and you smell, they'll tell you. They'll tell you what to do to solve it, and they'll kick you out and say, come back after you've done that, and I'll be happy to play with you, dude. I love your army, right? Until that happens, go and get a wash, go get some fresh clothes on, and then we'll see you again, alright? Just being obese, it's something that I wouldn't pick on somebody for. But being smelly, there's no excuse in the modern age. Sorry, there isn't. There isn't. Showers are readily available. Dude, if a trucker who drives 20 hours a day can get a shower at a truck stop, which is one every 150 odd miles, you can get a shower. That's the point I'm trying to make. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, moving on. Mark says, "Hey Northern, Mark here again. I just wrote and submitted a hobby nightmare which included my brother Carl again. It got me thinking about other hobby nightmares, and I figured out I would start with the ones that included my brother. I've played long enough that I have a couple of hobby nightmares I think are worth submitting, but I couldn't get this one out of my head after I thought about it. So I'm writing it down now to get it out there so I can get some sleep." Fair enough, dude. I'm glad you're using hobby nightmares to offload this from your brain a little bit. Before we get into it, though, you can just say, "Sorry to hear that, dude," and take it as read for the rest of this. I think it will be a long one, so a cup of tea isn't a terrible idea. It isn't too long, mate. No, you're alright. But I'm sorry to hear that, dude. I'll say that now. Okay, fair enough. I won't say it again. I'll say it now. This one is more of a hobby for me than my fantasy days. Sorry? Oh, sorry. This one is more about hobby than my fantasy days. As I mentioned before, the hobby aspect of the game has been important to me throughout all of my time playing. I learned to paint with my fantasy warriors, and with my Tau, I focused on them looking good and appropriate in almost all of my games. I then went into a cool themed Canada White Stars force that won best painted in my small rogue trader outfit that I had bought into. The answer, the obvious question, yes, I am Canadian. Fair enough. Fair enough. America Light. Diet America. There you go. But the key for me is that I wasn't satisfied with just doing well in smaller rogue traders. I don't know what that means. I wanted to up my game to eventually win grand tournaments as a hobby. In order to do that, I decided to hop into Tyranids and spend a lot of time and effort upping my game. I learned glazing, NMM, wet blending, scenic basing, sculpting large details. I made a display board and spent a lot of time eliciting feedback from people I respected on my colour scheme and execution. This effort took a lot of time and effort. I had a grand tournament in mind with the hope to get a good base and come in the top 10 for my hobby. I would then have a good base to work on to win best painted in a grand tournament going forwards. Well, the tournament I identified as my grand tournament to compete at was a nice one where I could just go over to my folks' place and save on a hotel. There also happened to be a doubles event on the Friday night before the singles. So, I called up my brother, who at that point lived on the other side of the US. I convinced him that this would be a good excuse to get together and roll some dice. He hadn't really played for a long time, so I mentioned we could hop in the tabletop simulator and run a couple of practice games to bring him up to speed on the rules before the tournament. I'd just be the primary rules guy on the day of. We weren't intending to be competitive or anything, we were just wanting to have fun. We had talked about building armies so that his marines would be killing my Nids and my Nids would be killing his marines. Then, the display board for the doubles tournament would be super awesome and thematic. Life and a lack of playing to add enthusiasm on his end meant he brought his previously painted Blood Angels. The focus was on fun though, so I wasn't too concerned. So we went with a bunch of Dreadnoughts and Nid monsters of a Mecha Kaiju style list. It was really cool. So, with all this build-up and tons of effort, organisation, excitement and expectations, this is where the "sorry to hear that" comments will start coming in. Okay. I was diagnosed with stage 3C cancer like a week before the tournament. Oh no, dude. Ugh. What does stage 3C mean? I don't really want to search for this in case my missus finds it and... Do you know what? Let's do it incognito. Stage 3C cancer. means there are cancer growths larger than 2 centimeters on the lining of your abdomen. Okay. Might also be cancer in your lymph nodes. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Yeah, lymph nodes ain't good. That's all I really know about it, right? As soon as they mention the name lymph nodes, ooh, that's not good. Before I continue, I will just mention... I was diagnosed with stage 3C cancer like a week before the tournament. Before I continue, I will just mention I am fine and cancer-free now for a couple of years. Yeah! Let's all have a little... I don't know why I'm clapping, but let's all say a little prayer or whatever it is you do. We've got to... Our fellow hobbyist is alright. Good. Touch wood. It stays away. And you remain cancer-free, my dude. I'm really happy to hear that. I thought this was going into a really horrible place there. You know, but here we go. However, at this point in the story, they wanted me on the surgery table yesterday to be followed by chemo as soon as possible. I told the doctor about the tournament and all the work and emotions around it for me, and he was like, yeah, I guess we can put off the surgery for a week. What are you doing? What are you doing? Warhammer doesn't matter. You have cancer. Go and get your surgery. If I was your doctor, I'd be slapping you. What is wrong with you? My wife was aghast, but I was of the opinion cancer would take enough from me, but it wasn't going to take this. I disagree. Warhammer doesn't matter. You've got a wife. You've probably got kids. Dude. What if that week made all the difference, right? If they want you in now, time is of the essence. If they've caught it to the point where they can get you into surgery, get chemo, and you might be cured of it. Not cured, but you might get rid of it and have another 20 years onto your life. Get it done. The models can wait. You've got the rest of your life. I don't agree with this decision at all. Alright? Also, in an incredibly stressful time, it's nice to just do the hobby you love. What are you doing? Especially before the big struggle I had in front of me. Dude, alright. I'm just going to be honest with you here. This is where, right, you've just got to do some man shit. You just got to do some man shit. Put your toys down, right? It's going to be a struggle. Find the joy where you can, but do right by your family first. Get that surgery done. And get that chemo done. Alright? There are more important things in life than playing with bloody models. Alright? There really is. I get what you're saying. I accept your argument, and I disregard it. Sorry, no. There's no excuse for being like, oh no, I want to play in this tournament. Dude, if I was your doctor, I'd drop kick you out the room. Like, if you don't want to live, and because you want to play stupid models, piss off. I have a lot of people here who want to live. Alright. I have a lot of people in my office here who actually want my help. I'd be a terrible doctor. So I'd be doing this all the time. Do not even mention Warhammer to me in this context. Oh, well, look, I've got this tournament that I really want to go to. I don't care. I don't care. You're going into surgery next week. I don't care. Right, you know. I honestly, it's your choice, but I'd be furious if I was your doctor. I'd be absolutely furious. For even bringing that up, I'd be furious. You know? You got a family there, dude. I don't get the head computation here. I don't get it at all. I don't know, man. My symptoms included crippling bouts of back pain, so I was icing my back with a water chiller so I could sleep at night. So I was concerned about how I would feel during this tournament. Then why are you doing it? Day 1. My brother and I lost pretty gloriously, as anticipated, having a great time while doing so. To our surprise, we ended up winning Best Painting. A nice celebratory dinner back at home capped off a very nice day. Saturday, though, was day 1 of singles. Now, I focused a lot on hobbies, but I will point out that I aim to make a good list. I also generally am a pretty good army pilot. My weaknesses typically fall in that I compromise some list building for models, and that was the case here. I was running 3 Toxicreens, which are models that I love for their big noodly tentacles. they were decidedly not the meta pick along with the rest of my army. I felt though, I felt though this list was good, if not meta. So, I had hopes of doing well in the tournament. Dude, all of this that I'm reading is paling in the background. What are you even doing there? What are you even doing there? Worrying about tentacles. Things I'd never thought I'd say, right? Ridiculous, dude. This is the wrong decision. I hope you learn from this. You got a lucky escape here, my friend. A very lucky escape. Hilariously, my first game was against a judge for the doubles event. Serious tournament player who immediately brought out a chess clock. Super nice guy, and before the game he mentioned my army was beautiful and that he was sorry we were playing in round 1. The implication being he didn't want to knock me into the losers bracket so quickly. Well, an hour later, I'm chatting with Carl about my victory. That was essentially the roadmap for all of day 1. Very confident opponents who got blown off the table pretty super quickly. Then I hung out with Carl to watch his games, and at the end of the day they asked me to leave my army out on display on the board for the top gen judging for the hobby. So day 2 ended on a really high note. I'm 3-0 with convincing wins. My hobby goals were achieved, things are great, except my back, which is starting to take a real bad turn. So I fire up the ice chiller and try and get some sleep. Day 3 rolls around, and boy am I thankful I had my army already set up in the tournament hall. Walking in, it was real obvious how in rough shape I was in. Carl was like, "Hey buddy, we can just go home if you want, I really don't mind." And I decided to make that call when I got to where I was going to play my first game of the day. The back pain typically got much better with the day and wasn't bad while actually playing. The distraction is a powerful thing, so I sat down and I feel okay. Carl brought my armor over for me, and day 3 began. Unfortunately for me, I am lined up against a newly released and very powerful AdMech army. Durability with a ton of great shooting at range, from their light infantry to their heavy vehicles. AI perfectly suited to my monsters. They would go on to get heavy nerfs later. Well, I go first and get a couple of punches in, and then lose half my army in his turn 1 on the punch back. Just a really bad matchup for me. The guy was a total gent though, but he proceeded to rub my face in the dirt terribly. I was still in the running for best Tyranid if I went 4-1 or potentially had a good 3-2 score, so I went into game 5. Anyways, game 5 was against some Thousand Suns, which was a style of list my buddy ran against me all the time, and I typically won. This was a very winnable game for me, but at the end of the tournament, I think all the stress and strain meant I made a few key decisions poorly. I lost, and it also meant I lost best Tyranid player. I had a nice supper with my family and then I went home, had surgery, went through chemo, and beat cancer. I'm sure you can imagine, with lots of support from my family and friends, to whom I am eternally grateful. Dude, I'm going to say this now, if you were my son, and you had cancer, and you came to me, and said, "Dad, I've got cancer, and they told me to have surgery like yesterday, so they were going to book me in for this week." "Yeah, so you're going, yeah?" "No, I'm going to Warhammer tournament instead." I would get my belt, and I would beat the living piss out of you, even if you're a grown man. I'm being serious. If you've got a family, do you know what I mean? I would lose my shit. I would be like, what have I brought up here? That's your... What? That's your priority? Your little tentacle toys? That's your priority? I'm putting you in a sack, and I'm taking you to the hospital. I'm knocking you out, and I'm throwing you into that treatment room, into that theatre. There are more important things in life than Warhammer, man. You got lucky here. You got lucky. For lighter hobby cancer stories though, since I was in that chemo chair for over 4 hours at a time, I brought my Warhammer to paint. I took my easier Team Canada guys who use a lot of red highlighted with orange. Well, my oncologist walks in on me with a wet palette, just covered in blood red and nasty oranges and browns. She was horrified and was like, "What the hell is that?" I explained and showed her some models. She was like, well, at least you're making use of your time. I'll never forget the look on her face and how she immediately jumped on it. Yeah, mate, if you're... Because orange is a bad colour. That's like iodine colour. That's probably why. The other cool bit is because of cancer, it helped me decide who my Primarch should be when I got into 30k after my treatment was done. Now, my group just let me use the Team Canada guys in 30k. The Team Canada individual models have the names and numbers of Canadians that have played best on the best international hockey circuit for Canada. Naturally, the best hockey players like Gretzky, Howe, Orr, etc. have already been used. I really liked how those big name models came out, so I don't want to rename them or not use them. So I needed a choice for the Big Daddy Primarch. Well, after my fight with cancer, I went with the great Canadian cancer icon, Terry Fox, who gave me inspiration during my fight. Now, Terry Fox had a prosthetic leg because he lost part of it due to cancer. There's also a famous shot of him wearing Daryl Sittler's jersey at a big event in Toronto, so I had a number 2. A buddy of mine modified the STL file I was going for Terry Fox, so it was a prosthetic leg at the same spot as the real Terry Fox. Thus my quandary on who the Primarch should be was resolved. Hopefully this wasn't too long and rambly. You can imagine, it's a story with a lot of personal weight to me. Anyways, thanks for the space to tell my story, even if you don't read it on YouTube, as I said. I just feel like I wanted to get it out there. Cheers, Mark. Well, Mark, I am very, very, very glad that you are cancer-free, my friend, and I'm very glad you beat it, right? I've said enough about what I thought of your choice there. I'm not going to say much else, right? I think it was the wrong one. I think you got lucky in making it. I'm going to be completely honest with you. But I'm really glad you're cancer-free, dude. I'm really glad you got over it. And I'm really glad that you had a good tournament. Again, I can say no more than that, you know? It must be... I didn't even know the mental strength it takes to know you've got cancer and to ignore it and go to a tournament anyway. I couldn't do that, man. I couldn't do that. I'm the kind of person who, if there's a really big issue going on, I want it solved. I want to put all of my energies into solving that problem, and then I move on to the next one. And I can't think of anything else in that time frame. I know that's kind of a toxic way of thinking about it, but that's just how I am. You know what I mean? So, that's probably Nightmares for today. Hopefully I'll be doing a video with Outer Circle tomorrow. We will see. And if not, there'll be a 40k rant on the way tomorrow. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon. Have a good one. Bye now.